Today I'm going to tell you guys how I, 32, wasn't good enough for my wife, 36. I still don't know why, and it still bothers me today. We were married for 9 years when my wife went from a happy, outgoing, communicative woman to a completely shut down and gloomy individual. She mentioned that she was having trouble finding purpose in life. She really enjoyed fitness and working out, so she did work at a gym as a trainer for a while, but suddenly quit after one of her students insulted her and said she didn't know what was good for them. She didn't want to work for a large corporation and couldn't find any shops to work at. Before I knew it, she stopped taking care of herself. She didn't want to exercise and started overindulging in edible treats she would normally limit herself with. But then, just as quickly as it happened, it started to reverse. My wife didn't tell me anything different, other than she was starting to feel better. I thought that was great, and asked her what caused her mind to change. At first, she said she didn't know, but then she said she started to realize that animals live their life, even without knowing their purpose, so she could do the same. That seemed fine to me. Around the same time, she adopted 2 cats. She started exercising again to take off the 10 pounds she gained, and she started doing her hair and makeup each day, even though she wasn't going anywhere that I knew of. I made sure to compliment her and offer her encouragement. I brought home cat toys and treats along with flowers for her. I did everything I could to support her and be her husband. It wasn't enough. One night I brought work papers home to work on, and the next day I forgot to bring them back to the office. So I returned home 3 hours after I went to work. There was an awfully nice car parked in our driveway. My heart started racing instantly. I didn't recognize it, so I knew someone was visiting my wife. I parked behind this mystery car to block them in and ran into the garage. I closed the sliding garage door to slow down anyone trying to escape. I really was thinking about the worst case scenario. After I entered the house, I made sure the front and back door were locked too. I went downstairs to our gaming basement, as we called it. As I came down the stairs, I saw them scrambling to stop doing what they were doing. One of them was my wife, and the other was a man I saw once before. I saw him at my wife's cousin's funeral a month ago, right before my wife's outlook on life changed for the better. Was this guy blood related to my wife? I didn't know. They were both naked. AP grabbed his clothes and dove behind a stack of boxes to get dressed. My wife wrapped a blanket around her, sat on the couch, and face planted into a pillow to scream. I asked loudly what the hell was happening right now, and my wife just asked me what I was doing back home. I asked if that was really important when I just found her screwing another man, and quickly followed up by asking who the hell he was. She said he was Alan, but we'll just call him AP. They met at the funeral we went to, and they weren't going to have sex. They were just going to make out for some innocent fun. I was so offended and disgusted with her at this moment. Why did she think that was even okay? Why did she want to do this, and did she take me for a fool? It was obvious to me they were having sex when I came down the steps, and I was sure this wasn't the first time he was in her house. I decided to bluff. I told her I installed discreet security cameras outside our house 4 months ago, so I was going to know if this wasn't the first time he was here. I shouted to AP, who was still hiding, and asked him if he'd been to my house before this. He was extremely nervous when he replied, telling me he didn't want any trouble and would prefer to stay out of it. I screamed that he was involved with my wife, so apparently he couldn't stay out of it. I asked him again if he was in my house before, and he said he would tell me whatever I wanted to know if I came with him outside to his car. My wife screamed for him not to tell him anything, which was the first admission that she wasn't telling me the truth. I looked at her with fury in my eyes. I couldn't help it. I'm so glad I didn't completely snap and go crazy or anything. I agreed to AP's terms and went with him outside. He couldn't have been older than 24, so he was at least 12 years younger than my wife. On the way out, I locked my wife in the basement. I had to shut the door really quickly because of how close she was to following us and protesting. I didn't want her to interrupt us at all. When we got outside, AP was very discouraged to see that his car was blocked in. I told him to start spilling the beans. He hesitated, of course. He probably didn't want me to savagely attack him, but he was outside now and could see his car, which gave him renewed hope that I would let him leave. He said they started seeing each other the day after the funeral. Every day I was at work, he came over to see her. He said at first it didn't go beyond just being friends and playing video games, but then my wife started coming on to him. She would ask him how she looked and stuff like that until they finally ended up doing it. I couldn't help it. I started crying. I asked him why. He said he only ever had a sexual relationship once before, so it was hard for him not to give in. He knew she was married and knew who I was, but he was excited she liked him. I said that was enough explanation. I thanked him for telling me the truth like a man. I moved my car so he could leave. Before he left, though, I told him never to speak to this woman again, even if she said we were divorced. I told him she wasn't good for anybody, and he could find a better woman than her. He agreed. Just after he left, my wife's sister pulled up like she was responding to a fire. She tried to get out of the car before it was in the park, and had to shove it into the park with her leg hanging out. She jumped out and started screaming at me that I locked her sister in the basement. I told her yes, I did because I had to talk to her lover without her screaming at us. She stopped dead in her tracks and asked, "Lover?" To which I replied, yes, she had a lover in her house while I was at work. Since I had time to talk with him alone, he told me they'd been sleeping together for weeks before I found them today. She was speechless. Just then, her phone started ringing. It was my wife. She asked me if we could go get her, and I said yes. We went in, unlocked it, and she barged in looking like a wild animal. When she stopped screaming, she realized her sister was much calmer than she expected. Her sister asked her if she was cheating on me, and my wife just rolled her eyes and asked if we were serious. Her sister told her to stop playing dumb and be honest because it is not okay for her to be cheating on me. My wife was speechless and annoyed. She finally said they didn't have sex. I let her know that AP told me everything before he left. She just stood there, looking like an idiot with her mouth hanging open. I told her I saw him on top of her, doing the motion, and I didn't need her admission. I just wanted a divorce. She did a double take and asked me why like she didn't already know. Her sister went upstairs to start packing her stuff. My wife's face was pale and her makeup was smeared by the time her sister persuaded her to get in her car and stay at her house for a while. She could not believe her life was changing and she was caught. I could tell she never really considered the possibility or consequences of me catching her in the act. It's a shame. If she put any thought into her actions, she might have realized she wasn't ready to move or divorce me. Why wasn't my support and presence enough in her life? I showered her with love, but she only thrived with the attention of another man. I told her these things when she wouldn't stop calling me. She said she couldn't live without me and she didn't think hanging out with this guy would lead to having sex. I told her I didn't believe a word she said because she had a man over at her house while I was at work. I added that her behavior switched so quickly once she met this guy, so I knew she was sleeping with him and relishing the attention. Her sister caught her having sex with a completely different guy in her own bed. That was obviously insulting and upsetting enough that she kicked out my wife. By this time, our divorce was final and I got to keep my house. 9 years ago, I had my wife sign a prenup in my favor, and since I was paying for the house and she didn't think we were going to get divorced, she signed it. I don't know where my ex is now. I haven't heard anything about her, and I'm extremely glad we never had children. I've since started dating a new woman, and we've been together for 1 year. I'm taking it slow and only have my girlfriend sleep over for short lengths of time. To be ready for a new marriage means you're perfectly capable of standing on your own 2 feet and don't depend on another person to function. I know that sounds odd because it's joining together in marriage, but that's the best way to ensure your marriage will be successful. Wow, OP. I am so sorry your wife didn't appreciate your attempts to connect and emotionally bond with her. From hearing your story, I assume that your wife got it in her head that she deserved more than just one man to shower her with adoration. It seems to me that she started having some kind of mental crisis about herself, and the only thing that helped was an outsider's flattering opinion about her. The problem that causes this is when a partner starts to see their spouse as less meaningful to them than other people. It might be because they start to focus on their spouse's faults, they become bored with routine, and marriage has provided them the comfort required to wonder if they deserve better. Of course, this is nothing more than a person's ego inflating. They too have faults. Faults that their partner accepts and works around. No one is more worthy than another for love and attention. We all deserve an equal chance to find unconditional love, which means having a spouse that doesn't decide to betray you for anything. Stay humble and stay committed, everyone. Thank you for sharing your story, OP. Now, let's get into today's second story. The marriage to my wife, 30, was all fun and games until I, 31, needed her to compromise with me. When we got married at 24 and 25 years old, I was extremely well off already. I'd been working at my father's company since I was 18 and had several raises over that time and savings built up. My wife was able to get her nails and hair done whenever she wanted. I bought her a nice car and made sure it was always safe and legal. She didn't have anything to worry about, and she got everything she wanted. She was a good wife to me and never acted suspiciously or unhappy. The only thing I expected of her was to be there and have dinner ready when I got home from work. It all changed when my dad began struggling to pay medical bills for my mom. I told him I was more than willing to help, but it meant I had to tell my wife to cut back on her spending. I asked her to spend less than $200 a month on pointless things. Of course, I didn't say it was pointless spending. I called it fun money. She was appalled. She didn't know how to spend as little as $200. I told her this sacrifice was for my mom, but that didn't seem to justify it for her. 1 month later, while I was doing our expenses, I calculated that she spent $821 over what we could afford. When I confronted her about it, she blew up on me. She said she couldn't possibly stop buying the things she needed to survive. When I asked her what she was talking about, she named a haircut, nail fillings, a new purse, Bath and Body Works, new clothes, and new shoes. I could tell she really believed she needed these things. I was starting to realize I married a heartless, materialistic woman. I told her this couldn't happen again. My dad and mom needed our financial help for a while, and it wasn't asking very much of her. She still didn't like it, but she said she would try harder. The next month, while I reviewed our purchases, I found she got gas in a town 2 hours away. This shocked me. I had no idea she even left town. I decided it was much better not to bring it up with her. Instead, I got a GPS tracker and put it on her car. I was going to accumulate proof that she was using my money to see someone behind my back. Surprisingly, that month her spending decreased from $821 over to only $305 over. Still bad, but she tried. I told her she was doing better, but I needed her to cut back even more. She wasn't as upset as she was the first time, which actually raised a red flag for me. Was she spending someone else's money? 1 month later, I had a record of all the trips my wife made while I was at work. There was a lot of shopping in a town that was 2.5 hours away. It didn't make sense because her spending was way down, only $168 total. What was happening? That's when I discovered she made trips to a specific neighborhood address 2.5 hours away. She visited this address and places near it on 10 days out of the month. On 5 other days, she went shopping in our area but didn't spend any money. How was that possible? I knew at this point she had to be seeing someone else. Someone that provided her money. My wife was pretty simple-minded, and her password for everything was the same for years. I finally caved in and got into her phone while she slept. I found a secret messaging app, which involved text conversation with someone programmed as lover. How disturbing. My heart was pounding as I read their conversation, which started 2.5 months ago. Around the same exact time, I told her she needed to cut back on her spending. She complained to this person that she was being cheated on, but didn't want to go through a divorce until she got revenge. So she lied to this man, and he gladly volunteered to sleep with her. He was a lonely older man who had money to spare because he was a lawyer. She found her perfect target. They sent each other pictures of very private areas, and she thanked him for treating her to things. In response to that, he thanked her for the sex. I can't tell you how mad I was. I never felt this level of betrayal. I woke her up and demanded she leave the house. She was shocked and offended, but all I had to do was throw her phone outside and she followed it. I locked all the doors and threw her car keys out the window. I shouted that she was lucky I even let her take the car because I bought it. She was crying and making excuses. I told her I saw everything she said to her lover, noticed the change in her spending habits, and had her GPS location throughout the month. She had the nerve to be upset with me. She screamed outside my house for an hour before she finally got in her car and drove away. The GPS showed she went to AP's house. I filed for divorce, and before it was even finalized, AP told her he didn't want her to live with him. He wasn't ready for a serious relationship, he just wanted to have some fun. I knew this because my wife confided in our pastor when she was homeless and begging the church for money. He was confused because as far as he knew, we were still married. While begging for money, she asked him to pray for her. I think she needs more than prayer. Word got around in our church, and a single lady approached me and asked me on a date. Shortly after that, the divorce was final and my wife only got to keep her car. Everything else was mine, due to the proof I had against her. My mom managed to recover from her health issues, and my income went back to normal in less than a year. That was the best part out of all of this. I made sure to tell my ex that she left me because she was materialistic and impatient. I hope my story encourages everyone to be hopeful in the face of betrayal. Life goes on, even if it doesn't involve that person anymore. Also, don't fall for any materialistic girls because they have a lot of growing up to do. OP, I am so sorry your wife didn't have the patience or consideration for you or your mom to cut back on her spending. There are people who have no choice but to live off of $1,000 in a month, yet there she was, complaining she had to give up her fake nails for a short time. It's hard to know if someone is choosing to be with you because of something other than who you are. I wish your wife would have put some thought and empathy into her actions. She didn't think of anyone but herself when she chose to find someone else's money to spend. Being materialistic is a shame, and it only makes someone crave more and more. Find the true meaning and purpose in life instead of burying yourself in crap and wasting your time and money. I'm glad you came out on top in the divorce, and she wasn't able to destroy you any more than she already did. I'm also relieved that your mom is doing better now. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in life. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.